Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill coming out of spring practice, coming out of the spring game. What does Michigan's depth chart look like heading into fall camp, heading into 2025? We went back and forth at a few of these predictions. I'm sure some Michigan fans are going to have some takes in the comment section as well. Before we even get into running through this depth chart, I want to encourage the Michigan fans to let it fly in the comment section. Dill, we always say, like, if you are a Michigan fan watching a depth chart prediction episode on May 1st, like chances are you got some takes as well. Let it fly in the comment section. Can't thank the Michigan fans enough. It's been a blast talking this team throughout spring practice, and this is kind of putting a bow on it, you might say. Let it fly in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, without further ado, quarterback room. I think this is probably pretty straightforward, right? Bryce Underwood, to me, going to be quarterback one. I do think the backup is probably going to be Mikey Keene once he gets back healthy, and apparently he's kind of back to starting to throw with the team going into fall camp. Jaden Davis at 3. Dill, I'm fired up that Michigan didn't mess around with any quarterbacks in the portal. Poured the reps, poured the experience into Bryce Underwood. Is that your take on how this quarterback room shakes out here?
Yeah, I'd imagine. Now, I do kind of think that Jaden Davis, Mikey Keene will be more competitive than I think you think
Really?
he is. I mean, Mikey Keene's a good quarterback. I thought Jaden Davis looked pretty good in that spring game. Now, again, his ceiling is not
Yeah.
Bryce Underwood. I don't think the quarterback one job is up for grabs at all. I think it's pretty clear that it's the Bryce Underwood show, and that's what I kind of like. But I don't know. I thought Jaden Davis played well. I thought he threw the ball on the run okay. I thought he was pretty accurate. Again, he doesn't have a howitzer necessarily throwing the ball, but he'll give you something similar, I think, to what Mikey Keene gives you.
That's probably true. Like Jaden Davis, Mikey Keene, similar kind of quarterbacks. I will say, like, I give the edge to Mikey Keene because he's better on the blocker time or two, especially in the Chip Lindsey offense.
Yeah,
Jaden Davis just a little bit limited in terms of attacking the boundary, throwing off platform, and pushing the ball down the field. Like we saw when Jaden Davis wanted to attack vertically downfield, those balls hung up a little bit as opposed to the ball that Bryce Underwood throws, which are just laser beams. Running back room, though. I don't know how much this matters. I think you have your top 2 running backs heading into 2025 pretty dang clearly in Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes, but I'll put you on the spot here. I'm going to put the Michigan fans on the spot too. Predict the leading rusher for Michigan in 2025. Jordan Marshall, Justice Haynes, who you got? You didn't expect this one, so I'm interested to hear.
I would probably lean Marshall because I think he's just got a bit more juice, like athletic juice, ability to hit home runs. That's kind of what I
Wait,
feel
so
like.
I think you're totally off because I think Justice Haynes has infinitely way more juice at the second level. Like
Infinitely?
Infinitely was a hyperbolic there. I think Justice Haynes is a little bit more juiced up when it gets to the second level in terms of the breakaway speed. Jordan Marshall a little bit more of that bigger back between the tackles, but Dill, sorry, I cut you off. Finish selling us on Jordan
Yeah,
Marshall.
I thought Jordan Marshall in that Alabama game looked awesome.
Yes.
I do think personally, like, just a little bit more explosive. Now, what I feel like from what they get from Justice Haynes is really good picking his way through holes and like kind of setting himself up and setting blocks up. Like that to me, I think both guys do that so much better than what Michigan had last year, just like understanding how to play the running back position. But I just think Jordan Marshall might just be a little bit better of an athlete. That's my read coming out of what I've seen from both players, more so on the field. I'm not really judging this as much off the spring game because the spring game is the spring game. But I go back to like the Alabama and what we saw from Jordan Marshall in that Alabama game versus Justice Haynes at Alabama. I think Jordan Marshall got a little more explosiveness.
I couldn't disagree more. I'm interested to hear what the Michigan fans say in the comment section. You must have not watched much Justice Haynes coming out of Buford, Georgia, man, because I think he's got some
We've seen him.
legitimate.
You can't be judging him off of Buford anymore. You got to judge off Alabama. Alabama was
And
really
I
good.
thought you saw this. I thought you saw the same stuff from Justice Haynes. Just that I didn't think they used him enough, quite frankly, at Alabama the first 2 years.
That's definitely
We'll
true.
see. Dill, I lean Justice Haynes, and yes, it partially has to do with like I love this kid coming out of high school. I don't think my opinion has changed on Justice Haynes. That 2-minute spat between us, it really doesn't matter though, because I think
I
both
was
of
gonna
these.
say, like, there's no point of even really putting a depth chart on the running back spot because
Yeah.
I really think it's gonna be awfully split. I'd be surprised if either had more than if it fell out of the 60-40 bounds, I'd be stunned in terms
I,
of
I I would probably agree with that too, and I will echo what you said. I think both of these running backs are significantly more complete than what we had with Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings did certain things well, but they weren't necessarily the all-encompassing running backs that you wanted. Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes are those guys.
even just Justice Haynes, like when you saw him set that play up to the boundary in the spring game, like just that understanding of how to set up Josiah Edmond to get around the edge on him. Like I just didn't feel like you had that feel from Michigan's running backs
No.
last year. And that was a huge, huge issue.
Oh, as
Being
much
able
as
to
I
run
love
and
Donovan
find holes and
Edwards,
all
the
that.
the feel for the running back position from Dono was it just never really seemed to come together. All right, wide receiver room. I think we both agree on this. Like Donovan McCulley at the X, Fred Moore, Samaj Morgan in the slot. Dill, if you had to pick a wide receiver from the 2 or 3 deep that you think could push for more opportunities in the fall camp and in early in 2025, what would that name be?
I think it's Marsh. I thought Marsh, in terms like his like again, has the size I think you're looking for. I think a really smooth mover, ability to move with the ball or move with the ball in his hands. I think Andrew Marsh is going to be that fourth guy, but I certainly agree. Smash Morgan, I came away from the spring game extremely encouraged by what he's going to be for this team because I looked at his ability and I wish we got to see him with Bryce Underwood a little more, but his ability to get down the field a little bit, beat guys off the line, I'm really excited to see what Samaj can be in this offense.
So my biggest takeaway was Channing Goodwin. And normally how I approach the spring games is like, all right, who are the quarterbacks targeting the most? Like those are probably the guys that were standing out during spring practice. And like Channing Goodwin might not have like the freaky size that McCulley or Jamar Broder has. Maybe not the speed that someone like Andrew Marsh or Samaj Morgan has. He was always open, man. And he seemed to be kind of Bryce Underwood's guy. And so Channing Goodwin's a name for me to monitor. We'll see. I think there are some that list of 2 deep, Jamar Broder, Andrew Marsh, Channing Goodwin. Very excited to see what we hear from them going into fall camp. Tight end position, I think this is pretty cut and dry. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen are your 2 top pass catching tight ends. Now, the most interesting storyline coming out of spring for me was not most, but it was a very intriguing storyline was Jalen Hoffman kind of playing that H-back position that Max Bredesen plays. Now, what's interesting about Jalen Hoffman is when Max Bredesen was on the football field, you almost kind of knew we were running the football. He wasn't really a guy that scared anyone as a pass catcher. Jalen Hoffman, I went back and looked at it, Dill. Jalen Hoffman can block his tail off. Like he is a very willing blocker, and I'm not sure if he's as physically as imposing as a guy like Max Bredesen, who is just an absolute hammer. But I think he gets the job done enough blocking. But now you inject a little bit more pass catching ability from Jalen Hoffman, who clearly emerged as a guy that can make a difference for this Michigan offense.
See, you say a little bit more pass catching ability. Like I
Oh,
don't
it's a
even think
lot.
they're in
Yeah,
the same stratosphere. And that to
100%.
me, like, I mean, yeah, Jalen Hoffman blocks well enough. He's willing enough. He's tough enough. Again, he's maybe not Max Bredesen in terms of just like pure ability as a blocker, but when the gap is so big in terms of how they catch the ball, and
Yeah.
Jalen Hoffman's, again, you said it, like ability to be a bit of a safety blanket for Bryce. I'd be really surprised if Jalen Hoffman's not taking
Now
meaningful
here's
reps
the
of what they
question though. Now
expected.
here's the question. Are we going to see as much 12, 13 personnel from this Michigan offense? Because last year when we really couldn't throw the football, like we used Max Bredesen a lot because we were running the football a lot. How much opportunity is there going to be for Jalen Hoffman in this new Chip Lindsey
Yeah, I
offense?
think if you go back to not the UNC version of Chip Lindsey, if you go back to the Auburn version, you did see them use an H back a little bit more. So I am
Okay.
interested to see how they like blend that in. And Auburn did want to run the ball a little bit more. UNC not as much, not as imposing of an offensive line. So I do think there's going to be a role. Now I don't think we're going to see it as heavily as what we saw
Yes.
for the last year because Michigan didn't throw the ball last year. But I do think there's a role for that H back role if you go back to kind of the Auburn version of what Chip Lindsey was doing.
Offensive line. I'll put my flag in the ground, man. Like Evan Link, the more and more I go watch that spring game, like I feel good about him starting a left tackle. Now,
You'll feel
the
good about him and Babalola. I thought Babalola
yeah,
looked awesome.
yeah, I couldn't believe how, and we've already talked about this, so we don't have to really hammer it home. But I couldn't believe how the Michigan spring game was reported on like this offensive line couldn't block, but you take a look at you watch the actual TV copy of the spring game and say, yeah, it was I thought pretty dang solid. My intriguing question is like, do they maybe mess around with Angie Sprague playing left? Because I do think eventually he could be your starting left tackle in the future. This is probably going to be the starting five that we see to start 2025. I'll ask you the same question that I asked you for the wide receiver room. You know, last year we had Dominic Gadis like kind of emerge out of nowhere and start at center week 1. If there was a guy to do that and go win a job in fall camp, who are you looking at doing that?
I mean, it's for sure Guanera, and that's just like I look like Qatar, Norton. I think those are like good, solid depth pieces, but they don't feel to me like Michigan day one starters. Guanera, I look at the way
Yeah.
he's transformed himself physically, what he looked like. I mean, you saw the flashes of freshman. You saw some really good play, obviously, in this year's spring game. He's probably the one, but I would frankly like to see less shuffling than what we saw last year from
I
this on.
agree.
I think, again, I look at the starting five or what could be the starting five. I
Yeah.
think it's good enough. I don't think there needs to be as much playing around with it because, frankly, Crippen was like far better than Dominic Wadis. I don't get what they were doing last year with that.
And you saw that play out early in the season where like this offensive line just looked kind of lost. Like individually, yes, they struggled at times, but I thought collectively they struggled even more. And I think that was probably a product of playing around with the rotation so much in fall camp. I think you have a good feel for what your starting five is going to be. Let them come together during fall camp. Don't mess around so much with different rotations. Circling back, Brady Norton's the guy that I just don't know if he's physically ready enough. You know what I mean? Like imposing. And I think Michigan wants to run the football. And that was something that stood out to me during the spring game. You know, say what you want at pass protection. I thought they were resetting the line of scrimmage and really
Yeah.
stimulating the run game. I don't know if Brady Norton is necessarily quite there in terms of what
I
Michigan.
think Babalola is easily the third tackle. I think he played
Yeah,
right or left. I think if they need to go to the third tackle, I think for sure it's going to be Babalola. I don't even
yeah, and
think
I'm interested to see what Ty Haywood looks like coming into in the summer. I thought he was more day one ready than Andrew Babalola, but I was impressed with what I saw from Babs too in the spring game. Defensive side of the football, I think you know who your two starters are on the edge with TJ Guy and Derek Moore.
I'd
I
say
think
so.
Cam Brand and Dominic Nichols are pretty clearly in the two deep. Nathaniel Marshall's the one that fires me up when you're talking about the edge rusher room, like a guy that's not on campus yet, but a guy that I don't know if he's going to play a ton because those freshmen normally need a year. As a pure pass rusher, this kid has legitimate juice. And let's just be frank about it. We're seeing these freshmen come in to college football more ready than they used to be 10 years ago. Like you saw Dylan Stewart, Colin Simmons, like dominate as true freshmen. I don't know if I'm quite there with Nathaniel Marshall, but I'm pretty damn close. He's the name to watch on the edge. Dill, the inside, I know you disagree, right? I have Trey Williams over Trey Pierce. I'll let you make your counter argument there.
Yeah, no, like Trey Pierce is a legitimate hammer. I think Trey Pierce is going to have a monster year. I think I
Yeah.
implore every Michigan fan to go watch the Oregon game again and just watch how good he can be. And I think like if you look at the athleticism, his ability to shed blocks, I just think it passes Trey Williams. Trey Williams, I don't think we've seen him play at that level that Trey Pierce was playing at in that Oregon game. So for me, I think Trey Pierce is pretty easily going to be the one or the guy running with Rayshon Benny because Rayshon Benny, he's the guy in that room. They need him to really, I think, have that type of big season. Trey Pierce to me is running next, and then I the only other quibble I'll have is Ike
Ike.
Luna might be in the two deep. Like Ike is a
Yeah.
really good player. He was really good
Yeah.
last year when he got a shot. I think again, even the way you listen to Wink talk about him and what he can
Yes.
be, I think
So
Ike's in the two deep.
here's another like similar to the conversation we had with the running backs. I don't know how much it matters because I think you're going to see a healthy rotation of these guys. I mean, last year was like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Rayshon Benny coming off injury, big time drop to the point where we didn't even want to play guys like Ike and Trey Pierce, you know, because they weren't quite ready. This year, I mean, I think you're probably going to see like 30 snaps a pop from like these top 5, 6 guys. Ed is the one that I'm looking for. Like, can he take that step? I don't know if you totally saw it in the spring game, but again, that's just one spring game. I'm not going to evaluate him in terms of what he can be. It doesn't. I don't know if it matters. Like Trey Williams, Trey Pierce, Demond Payne, Rayshon Benny, Ike. They're gonna play a lot of football for Michigan.
Oh,
All
and yeah, that obviously, but I do think like day one, who are the guys trotting out there? I think it's
Trey
going to be
Pierce.
Guy, Benny, Moore, and Trey Pierce. I think I think
Here's
they're
the other argument for Trey Pierce is he's getting better. Like Trey Williams, you kind of know what he is going back and watching Matt Clemson. I don't think you're going to see a massive step in the right direction going into his 5th year. Like Trey Pierce only going into year 3, and you clearly see this kid getting better. And I wouldn't be surprised if he takes another step in fall camp. Linebackers, Ernest Hausman, Jay Sean Barham, and I think the conversation is who's linebacker 3. When we decide to use Jay Sean Barham some creative ways, who's going to be that other linebacker playing with Ernest Hausman? I think it's personally between Cole Sullivan and Jimmy Rolder. Who are you going with here?
I think it's Cole. I think it's got to be Cole. Just his athleticism and Jimmy Rolder is a good, dependable linebacker. I think he's
Yes,
going to play a
agreed.
decent amount. I think Cole Sullivan though, when you go to your top 2 after Jay Sean Barham goes to edge, let's say I think it's Cole Sullivan. I just think he's a much better athlete than Jimmy Rolder. I think physically he's built himself up to what I think he needs to be to play in the Big Ten. I think he's got to be the next guy up.
Jimmy Rolder could be all conference linebacker this year. The emergence of him is so big because now you really can get creative with how you want to use Jay Sean Barham. Secondary. It sounds like Zeke's going to stay out on the boundary. And so it's going to be Zeke and Jair Hill, boundary cornerbacks. I don't think that's a question. I think it's pretty obviously Shamari Earls and Josiah Edmond probably in the 2 deep. Nickel and safety, Lamar Morgan's been very clear. We are cross-training these guys so we have the ability to play our best 5. Dill, if I'm asking you right now on May 1st, who are the best 3 safeties / nickels that will be on the field, who are you going with there?
Yeah, I think Tevis kind of did feel to me like he
Yeah,
locked up
he
that
really
nickel
did.
spot. I thought he
Can't go
looked
wrong
really
about
good. I
that.
thought he was more of a pure nickel than anyone else they have,
Yeah.
aside from maybe Zeke Berry if they decided to put him back there. But yeah, I think Tevis is the guy. And then safety, TJ Metcalf was like awesome. So TJ Metcalf, I feel like it's going to start. And then I think a lot of it's going to come down to Rod Moore's health in terms
Yeah.
of like where this team is kind of at and what he can be coming back.
I think this is probably what it looks like if Rod Moore's not quite ready to go. Mason Curtis probably starting with TJ or Braden Hillman. You're gonna argue for?
I would probably think they go Hillman next.
Okay,
I
I
think
mean
Brandon
it's either one of them. And Bill, here's the other thing that I kind of find intriguing is it might kind of vary on what offense are we playing that week. If you're playing the Iowa Hawkeyes and you want to play nickel, Mason Curtis might be that guy to play nickel as that bigger nickel that can be almost your 3rd linebacker. When you're playing the Oregon Ducks in Eugene, you might want to go with a little bit more coverage ability and speed. I like the versatility in the secondary. And Dill, it seems like a lot of these guys can do a lot of different things. This is kind of the overarching take I'll have. This is kind of how I'll sign this one out. This team is so much deeper, and it might not necessarily have 3 top 15 NFL draft picks like it did last year, but it feels like it's more complete. It's deeper. It's more versatile, and that matters. I think in a big way for Michigan. I think there are going to be a lot of people in the national media that make a big deal about losing Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Colson Loveland, Will Johnson. And I'm not saying we're not going to miss those cats because we are, but I just feel like it's a more complete football team than we had in the
Yeah, and I
2024.
think you'd like to see the NFL draft look a little bit more like it did in 2020 or in 2024 after the 23 season, where again you didn't have first rounders, but what were there, like 15, 16, 17, something like that number of guys. Like last year,
13, yeah.
you put a bunch of top end hammers into the NFL, and you
Yeah.
like to think that you have a couple of those. Derek Moore comes to mind. Like that type, Andrew Sprague, if he can kind of develop, like there's some guys who I think can really be top end, great players. Hogan Hansen, I'd probably throw in there, but I think you'd like to see more of a deep NFL draft class, if you will, from this Michigan team, just showing like again, you're pretty much every team has a player, has a guy who's going to the league, and that just wasn't the case last year.
Yeah. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Let it fly in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.